Hello, and welcome to From Upside Down to Right Side Up, Tips for the Transition. I'm Maria Tomas Keegan, your host. And this is my continuing series of interviews in which I chat with strong, resilient women who have an inspiring story to tell. And it's a story of transformation, and they are courageous enough to share it with you. Today, my guest is Diana Gogan, who will share her story of discovering the hard way that a very successful corporate career may not equate to a very happy life. She compromised so much to achieve status, the important title, and the big bucks that she lost herself in the process. The title of this episode is Dropping the Mask. Welcome, Diana.
Oh, thank you, Maria. I'm so excited to be here. And just hearing you say that, I'm already tearing up.
Well, I appreciate that. Telling these kinds of stories is not easy to do. So I appreciate that you've chosen to share it with us.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for listening. And the tears really are just in recognition of all that has transpired from that point. And I think like so many of us, I started off in my early 20s, looking forward to career and, making money and making an impact and going, doing a job that you love and all those things that we, ideally strive for as we enter into the workforce. And which I did, and I had high hopes and was really eager to put my best foot forward and to grow and to become, very successful. That's how we're taught. That's what we feel is expected of us a lot of times. And so I started down that track, and started as a part-time teller on a. Well, we'll try her out and see, because she doesn't have experience, to really zooming up that ladder. And it was all thrilling and exciting. And we built a new house, and we were buying new cars, and we were all of those wonderful things that kind of income affords you. And so I did come to a point in my life, though, and this was 20 years in, so I was at this for a while, where I found myself crying in the parking lot before going into work. And it wasn't just a few tears, it was something that was just that heart-wrenching, rib-crushing cry, that just, the ugly cry, I guess, is the best way to say that, where you're just sobbing in the car. And after that happened a couple of times, it was like, I came up with a plan. It was like I needed to park now, clear out in the back of the parking lot, so that my peers and my bosses and, the people I worked with would not see this, because it became almost a ritual, if you will, before going into work. And it was just that time where I could just let go the anguish and the despair and the overwhelm and the feeling of my soul being crushed, and gathering up all the strength and the happy face and putting that mask on, walking into work, which I always did, and walked in and went through the day and all was good. But that became something that was happening time and time again. And I thought I was handling it really well. I thought nobody knows about this. I'm, I've got the happy face on. I've got the successful, happy to be here attitude, working forward, teamwork, all of that good kind of stuff. And I didn't have any idea that anybody knew what was going on. And that also carried over into home, to where, I began continuing to have to hold that mask up at home, because I didn't want to fall apart at home either. And so everything was, I thought, fine, until one day I got home from work, and my husband greeted me at the door and said, "We need to talk." And oh boy, that put that, instant pit in my stomach. I could feel my throat close, my chest tighten, all of that kind of stuff. And it was like, that was the last thing I had expected to hear. And so I was like, big gulp, and all right, let's go in and talk, and again felt that mask kind of fortifying, in that protection mode. And what he said was, I can't do this anymore. And I'm like, well, what can't you do? And he said, I can't live the rest of my life walking on eggshells, because I never know when you're having a good moment or a bad moment, or when you're going to get paged, because that was still the era of paging for communication, when you're going to get paged and that's just going to send you down that hole. He says, I can't do this anymore. This is not who I know. This is not the woman I love. This is not how I ever expected our relationship to go. And he says, I can't do this. It's really affecting me. And ultimately, he says, I don't think you see this, but it's affecting us. And wow, that was just like, getting hit with a ton of bricks. Completely blindsided, because, I thought I had it all together. And as you can imagine, once that mask even cut down a little, I was still trying to hold it up. But even as it started to fall, the emotion and the realization and the again, it was just the emotion just rolled through, and I really began to see clearly what had been happening over the years. Yes, I had a great job. I was climbing the ladder. My peers, my mentors, my bosses and supervisors in front of me, were like, you've got it made. This is what you do. The plan was laid out. I had everything but the corner office. I was still in a cubicle at that time, so I wasn't quite in the corner office yet. But 6 weeks vacation, benefits. I was part of a group that was really high status and doing a lot of good things for the company. But I realized that through that all, and through having this conversation with my husband, I sold my soul.
Wow.
And
yeah, you're not the only one. You're not. It's funny because I can relate to your story so well, Diana. Having been in corporate for over 30 years myself, and I spent a number of them at the end of that tenure wearing a mask every single day and feeling disconnected and pretending everything was okay and just going through the motions. So I used to think it was just me, and I heard you say the same thing, that you thought it was just you and that you thought you had covered it up. But those, at some point, it's kind of seeps through that suit of armor we put on. It seeps through, and people start to recognize that you've changed, and you may not even recognize it.
Oh, absolutely. And it was one of those things, so after we had that conversation, I realized that, the ultimatum not the ultimatum, but the choice he was giving me was, it's either our relationship and we'll figure it out, or it's your career. And he was like, I don't care what the choice is. I just need to know for me. And there was no hesitation in that. It was like, well, yeah, I'll drop the damn job. I don't even like it anyway. That's kind of what poured out. And I was like, whoa, did I say that out loud?
Yeah, be careful what you wish for, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
well, I think we're at a point here where I would love to stop this segment, because I think you're going to start getting into the emotional stuff that you want to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And that is a part that I'd like you to focus on in our next segment, pushing down those emotions for so long, how that affected you and how you were able to break through that.
Wonderful.
Great. So thank you very much for sharing your story, Diana. This is Maria Tomas Keegan. Hold on. Watch the next video. It's going to be impactful. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of my chat with Diana Gogan. She shared her story of quickly riding up the corporate ladder only to find she compromised her values and her spirit. I'm Maria Tomas Keegan, and this is From Upside Down to Right Side Up, Tips for the Transition. I'm honored to share inspiring stories like Diana's. These are stories of reaching out and rising up because they help us to know that we're not alone in this life journey. Other people have gone before us, and we can learn from them. Thank you, Diana, for letting us see behind the mask you wore. I'd like to focus on the emotions you were feeling during that time and since. What did it feel like to stuff down those emotions and just keep plowing through day by day? And how did you discover that it helps when you allow the emotions to surface?
Really powerful, powerful questions. And I'm sure that there are many who recognize and feel this, and maybe are going through this right now. You know, when getting up every morning and facing the day, I would just dread the alarm going off in the morning. I found comfort in my routine, but what I found was happening in the routine is I began to just prepare, armor up, shove those things down, and it's very heavy. Any joy that I might have woken up with in the morning, like the dog was licking my face, was quickly replaced by this, all right, tough it up, here we go. And it was just really heavy. It's like carrying an extra, 100 or 500 pounds of weight. And not only that, there was a lot of emotion around not being who I was. And I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't really understand what that meant. I lived in a very logical world, and none of this inside stuff was anything that I really paid a lot of attention to. But I could tell there was something inside of me that was off, that was wrong. There was that, the voice, the expression, something was just dying, and I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even have a language for it, but it felt horrible. And so that put me into this, well, what's wrong with me? And, speculating about all the possible psychoses and health issues and things that could be wrong with me. It's like, well, I can't let anybody know about that. So you just keep putting barriers around, and more questions and doubts and things I had in myself just added more layers onto a really already toxic practice of emotionally stuffing things in. And, that of course led to needing an outlet from time to time. And sometimes that was me just wigging out, just flipping out. Sometimes it was eating. Sometimes, it was drinking. Sometimes it was whatever that is. Even exercise. At that point, I exercised a lot, but it wasn't necessarily a helpful exercise. It was just that space where I could just let it all out, and I didn't have to say a word about it, or I didn't have to really feel it. I could just let it loose. And it didn't take long before that became the new norm, and I forgot what life was like before. And as I thought about, well, what could I do differently? It's like, well, I don't want to change anything, and I don't want to admit that I can't handle this, or I'm not tough enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I can't make a go of it. At that time I was making more money than my husband. And so when he asked me, what is the choice you want to make? It was like, well, I want the marriage, but how in the world are we going to do that? So in addition to stuffing all of that in, there was now that concern and that doubt, and letting go of what I had been raised as security.
And a sense of responsibility for
right?
Oh,
absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because yes, that there's a huge sense of responsibility, a lot of which at this point, looking back, I realized was made up in my head.
Yeah. And what about the guilt?
Oh, the guilt was, I failed.
Yeah.
I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I was a fraud. I've let people down. I've let me down, but it felt kind of good. So that was a little confusing, making the different choices. But the guilt was actually just as heavy, I think, if not more heavy than shoving it all in. Fortunately, my husband was like, I don't know, but we'll figure it out. I had nothing to transition to, and he was all on board about figuring that out, which really kind of cracked the door on a very dark, deep cell that I had put myself in. And I saw the light for the first time, and I had no idea what the light was. I had no idea where it led to, but it also gave breath to that part of my soul that I didn't know was being crushed. I didn't know existed within me. I didn't know there was any other way of self-expression other than working really hard, and making a name for yourself.
Yeah. It's interesting that you share that part of the story. We are conditioned, I believe, when we are growing up and we go through high school, and then we're groomed to go to college, and we're groomed to then have, at least in our era, I think it's changing now, but there are a lot more entrepreneurial spirits in the younger generation, I think, that they see another way, but there wasn't another acceptable way for us, right? How many
No.
times did you hear, oh, you shouldn't do that, you can't make any money at that?
And there was that, either you had a career, at least in my mind at that point, I won't blanket this for everybody, it was either you have a successful career or you stay home and raise a family.
Yeah.
And a lot of women did both. But it was that career where you really got noticed, and you were expected, once you started that, to be able to handle both really well.
Right. So how did you overcome all of those emotions that were flying at you when your husband helped you crack open that armor that you were wearing, the mask, and you started to see some light, and you weren't quite sure what it was? I'm sure that was pretty scary. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of emotions around that kind of probably just like Pandora's box flew out of that.
Oh, it was. And there was, not only was it the recent emotions, but it was, like you talked about, it was that guilt and it was that wonder. And it's like, how am I going to survive? And on all that doubt, and I don't know anything else. And, the disappointment and the shame of what that looks like. And the only thing I had to go on at that time, because I didn't know myself, I didn't trust myself, is I had to trust in somebody else's belief and faith in me. And that, again, I felt myself putting a lot of pressure on, because, okay, now what if this fails? What if I don't live up to this expectation? And so it wasn't, the saving grace. It actually created more voices and more demons, if you will, and doubt about that. But I realized very quickly that the only thing that would change anything is if I took action and tried something. Hmm. And that's what, thankfully, my husband kept saying is, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And you can always go back. And so we had done some real estate investing at that point. And so it was like, well, maybe I'll go into real estate. Maybe I'll focus on that part and perhaps get my license. And it was like, all right, that was a little scary. I knew I could do it. I knew the tenacity and the focus and the determination it took me to get to where I was. And those were already skills that I had. And then so as I began to start seeing what I could do versus what I didn't want to do anymore, that started to shift things.
I love that you said that, because it's so important. It's what I work on with clients a lot, and that is getting past the fear of stepping beyond your comfort zone and taking some action, giving it a try, giving something a try, and then stepping back and evaluating from there. It is, action is, there is no faith without action. So faith in yourself, requires you taking some action and having someone with faith in you to be your backbone for a bit and kind of push you forward, recognizing that you have the skills and the talent, and it just requires a little faith in yourself. Taking that action is the most important first step. I love that you said that. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's the bravest and the hardest step sometimes to take.
It is indeed. Yeah. So I am very eager to hear what you're going to share in our next segment, Diana. If we are paying attention on our journey, there are beautiful lessons that we learn. Mm-hmm. And I want you to talk about reconnecting with yourself, how to let those emotions be heard, and finding your path and your purpose. So I invite everyone to stay tuned for the next segment with Diana. Hello, and welcome to the conclusion of my chat with Diana Gogan. Having reinvented herself after a successful yet unfulfilling corporate career, she is now a spiritual life coach and wayfinder. I just love that descriptor, Diana. She helps people find their way now, the way she found her own way. I love that. I'm Maria Tomas Keegan, and your host. This is part of my continuing series of interviews with brilliant and resilient women who have inspiring stories to tell and who are role models for the rest of us when it comes to learning to thrive. Diana shared her story of success, disillusion, and reinvention from a successful corporate business career to now helping women find their way. Hello, Diana. Thanks for being with us.
Hello.
I am certain you have some very profound and compelling lessons to share with our audience today. You and I have been on similar paths in that corporate career and behind the mask and wearing the armor, so I can't wait to hear what you have learned through your journey. That will now help other women. Please help us understand what those lessons are.
You know, I think one of the most exciting points is to be this far down that path. So, you know, my story happened in 2003. So I've got 16 years under my belt there. And one of the lessons that I probably didn't realize until years later that was very profound was the ability to let go of expectation. And that's a hard one. I still work through that, you know, today. And as I look back, I shared briefly before that transitioning out of that corporate career, and then I moved into a real estate career. And I was 4 years successful realtor. Then we decided to move states. It was during the downturn. I didn't want to go someplace I didn't know anybody and restart a career. But during that time, I began to feed my soul. I began to recognize the very large, passionate spirit that existed within me and began to express that. I learned, I took some coaching courses. I took energy healing. I started doing all of these things, and the idea was beginning to form in the back of my head that ultimately that's what I wanted to do. And so with this move, it was like the perfect time. You know, my husband and I both kind of laughed as we crossed the border from Utah to Arizona, is that we were going to have our midlife crisis. At that point, we had both left our careers and businesses behind. And, you know, I was going to come down and open a Reiki and coaching practice. And of course, through all of that, there was a lot of doubt, you know, the move, there was a lot of doubt. There was, you know, can I do it? And how am I going to meet people? And, you know, all of these things going through my head. But I had learned from leaving, the first big step of leaving the corporate job was to just start taking action. And some days that's the leap across the Grand Canyon. Those days are few and far between. Most days it's that little single footstep forward. Sometimes it's an inch, sometimes it's a foot. but is just keeping moving forward. And as I look back, I see how from that point, my husband said, you have a choice to make to where I am now. Had I held on to an expectation of what I should do and what I should be, who I should be, I would have ended up exactly like I was in my corporate career. That was the model I had followed. And now, if you had told me 16 years ago that I would be coaching people, I would be talking to people about their soul and their passions and their desires, that I would be have horses in my practice, which I love. That's a whole nother story. That was a 45-year dream that came true. But if you had told me that I would be coaching people using horses, I would have thought you were absolutely nuts. That's just crazy. So as I look back and I see all those different steps of evolution and how one thing led to another, has led to another, and led to another, it has been the most beautiful journey in reflection. Living it sometimes is a completely different thing because we don't know what we don't know. And so that has to be one of the most treasured gifts that I received from this, is learning to go with the flow, learning to connect with my spirit and my soul, learning to give it a voice, and using it to help me navigate so that I know what feels right and what feels off. And to be able to not only live in that realm of feeling, but also to logistically and logically know from experience that those feelings are right on. They're dead on. And having that trust in that. So that perhaps that second thing is really learning to trust myself and know who I am. I am a long way from knowing all that I am capable of and all of who I am. But that's what's exciting about that, because at this point now, I have the experience, I have the tools, I know to have some ideas, have some dreams. Absolutely. It's not like I'm walking blindly out there, but just to be able to let go of what it must or should look like and see what opportunities come up. It's like when you drive with your GPS, you plug in the location, but you have no idea the twists, the turns, the redirects, the completely, sometimes it takes you completely off course. You have no idea what all of that experience happens between here and there. And that's really where the joy and the juicy part of that is.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You said several things. Letting go of your expectations is so important. And it's so, as you said, it is so hard to do. And it takes courage to have a dream and not be attached to how it will happen.
Oh yeah, that's big.
It is big.
That's a big bet. Yeah.
It is big because we are conditioned to be in control of how it all happens. Mm-hmm. So that's a biggie. Letting go of our expectations. I thought about something as you were talking. I was thinking about the question you asked yourself, what if I fail? And I love to turn that around. Mm-hmm. So what if you couldn't fail? What if there's no such thing as failure? There's just a lesson to be learned.
Absolutely. And I agree completely with that.
And then you talked about taking that step. Being in forward motion will always keep us from getting stuck where we are. Mm-hmm. And I love the way you said it. Whether it's an inch or a foot, whether it's a toe in the water or you jump right in, it doesn't really matter. It's that forward motion that will allow you to be looking through the windshield instead of the rearview mirror.
Oh, yes. And I always love that analogy, of looking through the windshield.
Yeah.
Where you're going.
Diana, thank you so much. I think this is an inspiring story. I can't wait for lots and lots of women to listen to your story. I think there is a lot to be learned from you, and these stories can be difficult to share. So I'm so happy that you have the courage to be vulnerable and to share it with us here.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. It's always part of the growth and healing, right? There's always part of that, something that I learned from this as well. And so it's been an absolute pleasure to share.
Great. I'm so glad. And thank you all for watching. This series of interviews is inspired by my latest book, Upside Down to Right Side Up, Turning Transition into Triumph. It's now available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback, along with its companion journal. And I invite you to look for it and share it with the women in your life, so none of us will ever feel like we are alone. Many of us have gone through similar experiences, and we're here to help. And I believe it's our time to thrive. So will you join me in that? And Diana, before I let everyone go, please tell us the best way to reach out for you.
In this day and age, there's lots of ways to reach out. A couple of places I would refer, if you're on Facebook, Fire Horse Ranch is my business page, and I would love to connect with you there. Fire Horse Ranch is also the website, or you can reach me at diana@firehorseranch.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for watching. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomas Keegan.